Okay, here we go. Okay. The Clatchian waiter arrived with the bill, placed it in front of Death. The man was squat and brown with a hairstyle like a coconut gone nova. His round face creased into a puzzled frown when Death nodded politely to him. He shook his head like someone trying to dislodge soap from his ears and walked away. Death reached into the depths of his robe and brought out a large leather bag full of assorted copper coinage, most of it blue and green with age. He inspected the bill carefully, then he counted out a dozen coins. Come, he said, we must go. Mort trotted along behind him as he stalked out of the garden onto the street, which was still fairly busy, even though there were the first suggestions of dawn on the horizon. What are we going to do now? Buy some new clothes. These were new today. Well, yesterday, I mean. Really? Father said the shop was famous for its budget clothing, said Mort, running to keep up. It certainly adds a new terror to poverty. They turned into a wider street leading into a more affluent part of the city. The torches were closer together and the middens further apart. There were no stalls and alley-cornered traders here, but proper buildings with signs and hanging outside. Dude, loud. There weren't mere shops. They were emporia. They had purveyors in them and chairs and spittoons. Most of them were open even at this time of night, because the average Ankian trader can't sleep for thinking of the money he's not making. Does anyone ever go to bed around here? Said Mort. This is a city, said Death, and pushed open the door of a clothing store. When they came out 20 minutes later, Mort was wearing a neatly fitting black robe with faint silver embroidery, and the shopkeeper was looking at a handful of antique copper coins and wondering precisely how he came to have them. How do you get all those coins? Asked Mort. In Paris. An all-night barber sheared Mort's hair into the latest fashion among the city's young bloods. Why did I add a Z to Mort's? While Death relaxed in the next chair, humming to himself, much to his surprise, he felt in a good humor. In fact, after a while, he pushed his hood back and glanced at the barber's apprentice, who tied a towel around his neck in that unseeing, hypnotized way that Mort was coming to recognize, and said, a splash of toilet water and a polish, my good man. The elderly wizard, having a beard trim on the other side, stiffened when he heard those somber, laden tones and swung around. He blanched and muttered a few protective incantations after Death's turn, very slowly for maximum effect, and treated him to a grin. A few minutes later, feeling rather self-conscious and chilly around the ears, Mort was heading back towards the stables where Death had lodged his horse. He tried an experimental swagger. He felt his new suit and haircut rather demanded it. It didn't quite work. Man, Terry Pratchett truly does understand the heart of a boy. Mort awoke. He lay looking at the ceiling while his memory did a fast rewind of the events of the previous day, crystallized in his mind like little ice cubes. He couldn't have met death. He couldn't have eaten a meal with a skeleton with glowing blue eyes. It had been a weird dream. He couldn't have ridden a pylon on a great white horse and cantered up into the sky and then went where? The answer flowed into his mind with all the inevitability of a tax demand. Here. His searching hands reached up to his cropped hair and down the sheets of his smooth, slippery material. It was much finer than the wool he was used to at home, which was coarse and always smelled of sheep. It felt like warm, dry ice. He swung out of bed hastily and stared around the room. First of all, it was large, larger than the entire house back home, and dry, dry as old catacombs under ancient deserts. The air tasted as though it had been cooked for hours and then allowed to cool. The carpet under his feet was deep enough to hide a tribe of pygmies and crackled electrically as he prattled through it, and everything had been designed in shades of purple and black. He looked down at his own body, which was wearing a long white nightshirt. His clothes had been neatly folded in... Oh, it's 10. And he couldn't help... on a chair by the bed. The chair, he couldn't help noticing, was delicately carved with a skull and bone motif. Mort sat down on the edge of the bed and began to dress, his mind racing. He eased open the heavy oak door and felt oddly disappointed when it failed to creak ominously. There was a bare wooden corridor outside with big yellow candles set in holders all on the far wall. Mort crept out and sidled along the boards until he reached the staircase. He negotiated that successfully without anything ghastly happening, arriving in what looked like an entrance hall full of doors. What do you want, Puma? Puma, what's up? What's up? What? What's wrong? No, you can't get up on the table. What do you want? You want attention? You want out? You want pets? Okay, give you pets. Mort crept out and sidled along the boards until he reached the staircase. He negotiated that... Oh yeah, I just read this. Arriving in what looked like a entrance hall full of doors. There were a lot of funeral drapes here and a grandfather clock with a tick like the heartbeat of a mountain. There was an umbrella stand beside it. It had a scythe in it. Mort looked around the doors. They looked important. Their arches were carved in the now familiar bones motif. He went to try the nearest one, and a voice behind him said, "You mustn't go in there, boy." It took him a moment to realize this voice wasn't in his head, but real human words that had been formed by a mouth and transferred to his ears by a convenient system of air compression, as nature intended. Nature had gone Nature had gone to a lot of trouble for 6 words with a slightly petulant tone to them. He turned around. There was a girl there, about his own height, perhaps a few years older than him. She had silver hair and eyes with a pearly sheen to them, and the kind of interesting but impractical long dress that tends to be worn by tragic heroines who clasp single roses to their bosom while gazing soulfully at the moon. Mort had never heard the phrase pre-Raphaelite, which was a pity because it would have been almost the right description. I don't know what that means. Copy selection. Paste.
Pre-Raphaelite.
Pre-Raphaelite. A member of a brotherhood of artists formed in... Okay, no. A modern artist dedicated to restoring early Renaissance ideals or methods. An artist or by this brotherhood. Okay, and then formed in England in 1848 to restore the artistic principles and practices regarded as characteristic of Italian art before Raphael. Okay. Ah, okay. However, such girls tend to be on the translucent, consumptive side, whereas this one had a slight suggestion of too many chocolates. She stared at him with her head on one side and one foot tapping irritably on the floor. Then she reached out quickly and pinched him sharply on the arm. Ow! So you're really real, she said. What's your name, boy? Mortimer. They call me Mort, he said, rubbing his elbow. What did you do that for? I shall call you boy, she said. I don't really have to explain myself, you understand. But if you must know, I thought you were dead. You look dead. Mort said nothing. Lost your tongue? Mort was, in fact, counting to 10. I'm not dead, he said eventually. At least I don't think so. It's a little hard to tell. Who are you? You may call me Miss Isabel, she said haughtily. Father told me you must have something to eat. Follow me. She swept away towards one of the other doors. Mort trailed behind her at just the right distance to have it swing back and hit his other elbow. There was a kitchen on the other side of the door, long, low, and warm, with copper pans hanging from the ceiling and a vast black iron stove occupying the whole of one long wall. An old man was standing in front of it, frying eggs and bacon and whistling between his teeth. The smell attracted Mort's taste buds from across the room, hinting that if they got together, they could really enjoy themselves. He found himself moving forward without even consulting his legs. Albert snapped Isabel. Another one for breakfast. The man turned his head slowly, nodded at her without saying a word. She turned back to Mort. I must say, she said, that with the whole disc to choose you, I should think Father could have done rather better than you. That from the whole disc to choose from, I should think Father could have done better rather. I should think Father could have done rather better than you. I suppose you'll have to do. She swept out of the room, slamming the door behind her. Have to do what? Said Mort, to no one in particular. The room was silent, except for the sizzle of a frying pan and the crumbling of coals in the molten heart of the stove. Mort saw that it had the words, the little Moloch, patented, embossed on the oven door. The cook didn't seem to notice him, so Mort pulled up a chair and sat down at the white scrub table. Mushrooms? Said the old man without looking at him. What? I said, do you want mushrooms? Oh, sorry. No, thank you, said Mort. Right you are, young sir. He turned around and stepped to the table. Even after he got used to it, Mort always held his breath when he watched Albert walking. Death's manservant was one of those stick-thin, raw-nosed old men who always look as though they were wearing gloves with white fingers cut out, even when they're not. And his walking involved a complicated sequence of movements. Albert leaned forward and his left arm started swinging, slowly at first, but soon evolving into a wild jerking movement that finally and suddenly, at about the time when a watcher would have expected the arm to fly off at the elbow, transferred itself down the length of its body to his legs. propelled him forward like a high-speed stilt walker. The frying pan followed a series of intricate curves in the air and was brought to a halt just over Mort's plate. Albert did indeed have exactly the right type of half-moon spectacles to peer over the top of. There could be some porridge to follow, he said and winked, apparently to include Mort in the world of porridge conspiracy. Excuse me, said Mort. But where am I exactly? Don't you know? This is the House of Death, lad. He brought you here last night. I sort of remember, only... Well, the bacon and eggs, said Mort vaguely. It doesn't seem well appropriate. I got some black pudding somewhere, said Albert. No, I mean... Mort hesitated. It's just that I can't see him sitting down to a couple of rashers and a fried slice. Albert grinned. Oh, he doesn't, lad. Not a regular thing, no. Very easy to cater for, the master. I just cook for me and, he paused, the young lady, of course. Mort nodded. Your daughter, he said. Mine? Said Albert. You're wrong there. She's his. Mort stared down at his fried eggs. Puma, what is up? What's going on, babe? Do you want more attention? You want more pets? Okay, I'll pick you up. I'll pick you up. Come on, baby. I love you. No, I mean, it's just that I can't. Yeah. Mort stared down at his fried eggs. He stared back at their lake of fat. Albert had heard of nutritional values, and it didn't hold with them. Are we talking about the same person? He said. He said at last. Tall, wears black. He's a bit skinny. Adopted, said Albert kindly. It's rather a long story. A bell jangled in his head. Which will have to wait. He wants to see you in his study. I should run along if I were you. He doesn't like being kept waiting. Understandable, really. Up the steps, the first door on the left. You can't miss it. It's got skulls and bones on the door, said Mort, pushing back his chair. They all have. Most of them, sighed Albert. It's only his fancy. It's only his fancy. He doesn't mean anything by it. Leaving his breakfast to congeal, Mort hurried up the steps, along the corridor, and paused in front of the first door. He raised his hand to knock. Enter! The handle turned on its own accord. The door swung inward. Death was seated behind a desk, peering intently into a vast leather book, almost bigger than the desk itself. He looked up as Mort came in, keeping one calcareous finger marking his place, and grinned. There wasn't much of an alternative. He said, then paused. Then he scratched his chin with a noise like a fingernail being pulled across a comb. Who are you, boy? Mort, sir, said Mort. Your apprentice, you remember? Death stared at him for some time. Then the pinpoint blue eyes turned back to the book. Oh, yes, he said. Mort. Well, boy, do you sincerely wish to learn the utmost secrets of time and space? Yes, sir, I think so, sir. Good. The stables are around back. The shovel hangs just inside the door. He looked down. He looked up. Mort hadn't moved. Is it by any chance possible that you fail to understand me? Not fully, sir, said Mort. Dung, boy. Dung. Albert has a compost heap in the garden. I imagine there's a wheelbarrow somewhere on the premises. Get on with it. Mort nodded mournfully. Yes, sir. I see, sir. Sir? Yes? Sir, I don't see what this has to do with the secrets of time and space. Death did not look up from his book. That, he said, is because you are here to learn. It it is a fact that although the death of Discworld is, in his own words, an anthropomorphic personification, he long ago gave up using the traditional skeletal horse because of the bother of having to stop all the time to wire bits back on. Now his horses were flesh and blood beasts from the finest stock, and Mort learned very well fed. Some jobs offer increments. This one offered, well, quite the reverse. But at least it was in the warm and fairly easy to get the hang of. After a while, he got into a rhythm of it and started playing the private little quantity surveying game that everyone plays in these circumstances. Let's see, he thought. I've done nearly a quarter. Let's call it a third. So I get it. So when I've done that, corner by the hay rack, it'll be more than half. Call it 5/8, which mean call it 5/8, which means actually let me actually find this. I want to find this. Copy, paste. Okay, that's actually not so bad. I'm literally 30 pages off. The horse watched from its stall. Occasionally, okay, I skipped. It doesn't prove anything very much except that the awesome splendor of the universe is much easier to deal with if you think of it as a series of small chunks. The horse watched him from its stall, occasionally trying to eat his hair in a friendly sort of way. After a while, he became aware that someone else was watching him. The girl Isabel was leaning on the half door, her chin in her hands. "Are you a servant?" she said. Moore straightened up. "No," he said. "I'm an apprentice." "That's silly. Albert, you can't be an apprentice." Moore concentrated on hefting a shovelful into the wheelbarrow. Two more shovelfuls, call it three if it's well pressed down, and that means 4 more barrows. All right, call it 5 before I've done halfway to the. He said Isabel in a louder voice, that apprentices become masters, and you can't have more than one death. So you're just a servant, and you have to do what I say. And then 8 more barrows means that it's all done. It's all done all the way to the door, which is nearly 2/3 of the whole thing, which means, did you hear what I said, boy? Mort nodded. And then it'll be 14 more barrows. Only call it 15 because I haven't swept up properly in the corner end. Have you lost your tongue? Mort, said Mort mildly. She looked at him furiously. What? What? My name is Mort, said Mort. Or Mortimer. Mortimer. Most people call me Mort. Did you want to talk to me about something? She was speechless for a moment, staring from his face to the shovel and back again. Only I've been told to get on with this, said Mort. She exploded. Why are you here? Why did father bring you here? He hired me at the hiring fair, said Mort. All the boys got hired and me. And you wanted to be hired, she snapped. He's dead, you know. The Grim Reaper. He's very important. He's not something you become. He's something you are. Mort gestured vaguely at the wheelbarrow. I expect it'll turn out for the best, he said. My father always says things generally do. He picked up the shovel and turned away, and grinned at the horse's backside as he heard Isabel snort and walk away. Mort worked steadily through the 16th, 8ths, quarters, and thirds, wheeling the barrel out through the yard to a heap by the apple tree. Death's garden was big, neat, and well tended. It was also very black. The grass was black, the flowers were black, black apples gleamed among the black leaves of the black apple tree. Even the air looked inky. After a while, Mort thought he could see. No, he couldn't possibly imagine he could see different colors of black. That's not to say, not simply very black tones of red and green or whatever, but real shades of black, a whole spectrum of colors, all different and all, well, black. He tipped out the last load, put the barrel away, and went back to the house. And enter. Death was standing behind the lectern, poring over a map. He looked at Mort as if he wasn't entirely there. You haven't heard of the Bay of Monte, have you? He said. No, sir, said Mort. Famous shipwreck there. Was there? There will be, said Death. If I can find the damn place. Excuse me. That's funny. Mort walked to the lectern and peered at the map. You're going to sink the ship? Death looked horrified. Certainly not. There would be a combination of bad seamanship, shallow water, and a contrary wind. That's horrible, said Mort. Will there be many drowned? That's up to fate, said Death, turning to the bookcase behind him and pulling out a heavy gazetteer. There's nothing I can do about it. What is that smell? Me, said Mort simply. Ah, the stables. Death paused, his hand on the spine of the book. Why do you think I directed you to the stables? Think carefully now. Mort hesitated. He had been thinking carefully. In between counting wheelbarrows, he wondered if it had been to coordinate his hand and eye, to teach him the habit of obedience, or bring home to him the importance of the human scale of small tasks, or make him realize that even great men must start at the bottom. None of these explanations seemed exactly right. I think, he began. Yes? Well, I think it was because you're up to your knees in horse shit, to tell the truth. Death looked at him for a long time. Mort shifted uneasily from one foot to the other. Absolutely correct, snapped Death. Clarity of thought, realistic approach, very important in a job like ours. Yes, sir. Sir? Death was struggling with the index. People die all the time, sir, don't they? Millions. You must be very busy, but Death gave Mort the look he was coming to be familiar with. It started off as a blank surprise, flickered briefly towards annoyance, called in for a drink of recognition, and settled finally on vague forbiddance. But I'd have thought you'd been, well, out and about a bit more, stalking the streets. My granny's almanac got a picture of you with a scythe and stuff. I see. I'm afraid it's hard to explain unless you know about point incarnation and node focusing. I don't expect you do. I don't think so. Generally, I'm only expected to make an actual appearance on special occasions. Like a king, I suppose, said Mort. I mean, a king and reigning, a king is reigning even when he's doing something else or asleep even. Isn't that it, sir? It'll do, said Death, rolling up the maps. And now, boy, if you finish the stable, you can go see if Albert has any jobs he wants doing. If you like, you can come out on the round with me this evening. Mort nodded. Death went back to his big leather book, took up a pen and stared at it for a moment, and then looked up at Mort with his skull on one side. Have you met my daughter? He said. Yes, sir, said Mort, his hand on the doorknob. She is a very pleasant girl, said Death, but I think she quite likes having someone her own age around to talk to. Sir? And of course, one day, all this will belong to her. Something like a small blue supernova flared for a moment in the depths of his eye sockets. It dawned on Mort that With some embarrassment and a complete lack of expertise, Dust is trying to wait. I really like this book, actually. I really like this book. Hmm. In a landscape that owed nothing to time and space. Are you done? Okay. Which appeared on no map, which existed only in those far reaches of the multiplex cosmos. Actually, let me. Hmm. Excuse me, Jesus. I apologize. In a landscape that owed nothing to time and space, which appeared on no map, which existed only in those far reaches of the multiplex cosmos, known to the few astrophysicists who have taken really bad acid, Mort spent the spent the afternoon helping Albert plant out broccoli. It was black, tinted with purple. He tries, see, said Albert. It's just that when it comes to color, he hasn't got much imagination. I'm not sure I understand all this, said Mort. Did you say he made all of this? Beyond the garden wall, the ground dropped towards a deep valley and then rose into dark moorland that marched all the way into distant mountains, jagged as cat's teeth. Yeah, said Albert. Mind what you're doing with that watering can. What was here before? I don't know, said Albert, starting a fresh row. Firmament, I suppose. That's a fancy name for raw nothing. It's not a very good job of work, to tell the truth. I mean, the garden's okay, but the mountains are downright shoddy. They're all fuzzy when you get up close. I wouldn't have had a look once. Mort squinted hard at the trees nearest him. They seemed commendably solid. What do you do it all for? He said. Albert grunted. You know what happens to lads who ask too many questions? Mort thought for a moment. No, he said eventually. What? There was silence. Then Albert straightened up and said, damned if I know. Probably they get answers and serve them right. He said I could go out with them tonight, said Mort. You're a lucky boy then, aren't you? Said Albert vaguely, heading out to the cottage. Did he really make all of this? Said Mort, tagging along after him. Yes. Why? I suppose you wanted somewhere where he could feel at home. Are you dead, Albert? Me? Do I look dead? The old man snorted when Mort started to give him a slow, critical look. You can stop that. I'm as alive as you are. Probably more. Sorry. Right. Albert pushed open the back door and turned to regard Mort as kindly as he could manage. It's best not to ask all these questions, he said. It upsets people. Now, how about a nice fry-up? The bell rang and they were playing dominoes. Mort sat to attention. He'll want the horse made ready, said Albert. Come on. They went to the stable in the gathering dusk, and Mort watched the old man saddle up Death's horse. His name's Binky, said Albert, fastening the girth. It just goes to show you can never tell. You never can tell. Binky tried to eat his scarf in an affectionate way. Mort remembered the woodcut of his grandmother's almanac. Between the page of planting times and the phase of the moon section showing Deeth, the great Levaler, comes to all men. Yeah. Okay. It's just Death, the great leveler, comes to all men. He stared at it hundreds of times when learning his letters. It wouldn't have been half so impressive if it had been generally known that the flame-breathing horse the Spectre rode was called Binky. I would have thought something like Fang or Saber or Ebony, Albert continued, but the master will have his little fancies, you know. Looking forward to it, are you? I think so, said Mort uncertainly. I've never seen Death actually at work. Not many have, said Albert. Not twice at any rate. Mort took a deep breath. About this daughter of his, he began. Ah, good evening, Albert boy, Mort said Mort automatically. Death strode into the stable, stooping a little to clear the ceiling. Albert nodded, not in any subservient way, Mort noticed, but simply out of form. Mort had met one or two servants. On the rare occasions he'd been taken into town, Albert wasn't like any of them. He seemed to act as though the house really belonged to him, and its owner was just a passing guest. Something to be tolerated, like peeling paintwork or spiders in the lavatory. Death put up with it too, as though he and Albert had said everything that needed to be said a long time ago, and were simply content. Now to get on with their jobs with the minimum of inconvenience all around. To Mort, it was rather like going for a walk after a really bad thunderstorm. Everything was quite fresh, nothing was particularly unpleasant, but there was the sense of vast energies just expended. Finding out about Albert tagged itself onto the end of his list of things to do. Hold this, said Death. He pushed his scythe into his hand while he swung himself up onto Binky. The scythe looked normal enough, pale blue shimmer in the air that could slice flame and chop sound. He held it carefully. Right, boy, said Death. Come on up, Albert. Come on up. Sorry. Right, boy, said Death. Come on up. Albert, don't wait up. The horse trotted out of the courtyard and into the sky. There should have been a flash or rush of stars. The air should have spiraled and turned into speeding sparks, such as normally happens in the common, everyday trans-dimensional hyperjumps. But this was Death, who has mastered the art of going everywhere without ostentation and could slide between dimensions as easily as he could slip through a locked door. And they moved at an easy gallop through cloud canyons, past great billowing mountains of cumulus, until the wisp parted in front of them and the disk lay low, basking in the sunlight. That's because time is adjustable, said Death. When Mort pointed this out, it's not really important. That's because time is adjustable, said Death when Mort pointed this out. It's not really important. I always thought it was. People think it's important only because they invented it, said Death somberly. Mort considered this rather trite, but decided not to argue. What are we gonna do now, he said. There's a promising war in Klachistan, said Death. Several plague outbreaks. One rather important assassination, if you'd prefer. What? A murder? I, a king. Oh, king, said Mort dismissively. He knew about kings. Once a year, a band of strolling players, or at any rate ambling ones, came to Sheep Ridge, and the plays they performed were invariably about kings. Kings were always killing one another or being killed. The plots were quite complicated, involving mistaken identities, poisons, battles, long lost sons, ghosts, witches, and usually lots of daggers. Since it was clear that being a king was no picnic, it was amazing that half the cast were apparently trying to become one. Mort's idea of palace life was a little hazy, but he imagined that no one got much sleep. I'd quite like to see a real king, he said. They wear crowns all the time, my granny said, even when they go to the lavatory. Death considered this carefully. There's no technical reason why not, he conceded. In my experience, however, it is generally not the case. The horse wheeled, and the vast flat checkerboard of the Stowe plain sped underneath them at lightning speed. It was a rich country full of Stilton rolling cabbage fields, a neat little kingdom whose boundaries wiggled like snakes as small formal wars, marriage pacts, complex alliances, an occasional bit of sloppy cartography changed the political shape of the land. This king, said Mort, as a forest zipped beneath them, is he good or bad? I never concerned myself with such things, said Death. He's no worse than any other king, I imagine. Does he put people to death, said Mort, remembering who he was talking to, and added, saving your honor's presence, of course. Sometimes. There are some things you have to do when you're a king. The city slid below them, clustered around a castle built on a rock outcrop that poked up out of the plain like a geological pimple. It was one huge rock from the distant ram tops, Death said, left there by the retreating ice on the legendary days when the ice giants waged war on the gods and rode their glaciers across the land in an attempt to freeze the whole world. They'd given up in the end, however, and driven their great glittering flocks back to their hidden lands among the razorback mountains near the hub. No one on the plains knew why they had done this. It is generally considered by the younger generation the city of Stolat, the city around the rock, that it was because the place was dead boring. Binky trotted down over nothingness and touched down on the flagstones of the castle's topmost tower. Death dismounted and told Mort to sort out the nose bag. Won't people notice there's a horse up here? He said as they strolled to the stairwell. Death shook his head. Would you believe there could be a horse at the top of this tower? He said. No, you couldn't get one up the stairs, said Mort. Well then. Oh, I see. People don't want to see what can't possibly exist. Well done. Now they were walking alongside, uh, along a wide corridor hung with tapestries. Oh, I see. People don't want to see what can't possibly exist. Yeah. Okay. Now they were walking along a wide corridor hung with tapestries. Death reached into his robe and pulled out an hourglass, peering closely at it with a dim light. It was a particularly fine one. Its glass cut into intricate facets and imprisoned in the ornate framework of wood and brass. The words King Oliver the Bastard were engraved deeply into it. The sand inside sparkled oddly. Wasn't a lot left. Death hummed to himself and stowed the glass away in whatever mysterious recesses it had occupied. They turned the corner and hit the wall of sound, and hit a wall of sound. There was a hall full of people there, under a cloud of smoke and chatter that rose all the way into the banner haunted shadows in the roof. Up in a gallery, of a trio of minstrels were doing their best to be heard and not succeeding. The appearance of Death didn't cause much of a stir. A footman by the door turned to him, opened his mouth, and then frowned in a distracted way and thought of something else. A few courtiers glanced in the direction, their eyes instantly unfocusing as common sense overruled the other five. "We've got a few minutes," said Death, taking a drink from a passing tray. "Let's mingle." "They can't see me either," said Mort, "but I'm real." "Reality is not always what it seems," said Death. "Anyway, if they don't want to see me, they certainly don't want to see you. These are aristocrats, boy. They're good at not seeing things. Why, is there a cherry on a stick in this drink?" Mort said more automatically. "It's not as if it does anything for the flavor. Why does anyone take a perfectly good drink and put in a cherry on a pole?" "What's going to happen next?" said Mort. An elderly earl bumped into his elbow, looked everywhere but directly at him, shrugged, and walked away. "Take these things, now," said Death, fingering a passing canopy. "I mean, mushrooms, yes. Chicken, yes. Cream, yes. I've got nothing against any of them, but why in the name of sanity mince them all up and put them in a little pastry cases?" "Pardon?" said Mort. "That's mortals for you," Death continued. "They've only got a few years in the world and they spend them all in making things complicated for themselves. Fascinating. Have a gherkin." "Where's the king?" said Mort, trying to look over the heads of the court. "Chap with a golden beard," said Death. He tapped the flunky on the shoulder, and as the man turned and looked around in puzzlement, deftly piloted another drink from his tray. Mort cast around until he saw the figure standing in a little group in the center of the crowd, leaning over slightly, the better to hear what a rather short courtier was saying to him. He was a tall, heavily built man with the kind of stolid, patient face that one would confidently buy a used horse from. "He doesn't look like a bad king," said Mort. "Why would anyone want to kill him?" "See the man next to him? With the little mustache and the grin like a lizard?" Jesus. Death pointed with his sight. "Yes." "Yes?" "His cousin, the Duke of the Duke of Stohellet. Not the nicest of people," said Death. "A handy man with a bottle of poison. 5th in line to the throne last year, now 2nd in line. Bit of a social climber, you might say." He fumbled inside his robe and produced an hourglass, in which black sand coursed between a spiked iron lattice work. He gave it an experimental shake. "And due to live another 35 years, he said with a sigh. "And he goes around killing people?" said Mort. He shook his head. "There's no justice." Death sighed. No, he said, handing his drink to a page who was surprised to find he was suddenly holding an empty glass. "There's just me." He drew his sword, which had the same ice blue, shadow thin Shadow then blade as the scythe of office, and he stepped forward. I thought you used the scythe, whispered Mort. Kings get the sword, said Death. It's a royal, what's the name, prerogative. His free hand thrust his bony digits in beneath his robe again, and brought up King Oliver's glass. In the top half, the last few grains of sand were huddling together. Pay careful attention, said Death. You may be asked questions afterwards. Wait, said Mort wretchedly. It's not fair. Can't you stop it? Fair, said Death. Who said anything about fair? Well, if the other man is such a... Listen, said Death. Fair doesn't come into it. You can take sides. You can't take sides. Good grief, when it's time, it's time. That's all there is to it, boy. Mort, moaned Mort, staring at the crowd. And then he saw her. A random movement in the people opened up a channel between Mort and a slim, red-haired girl, seated among a group of older women behind the king. She wasn't exactly beautiful, being over endowed with in the freckle department, and frankly rather on the skinny side. The sight of her caused a shock that hot-wired Mort's hindbrain and drove it all the way to the pit of his stomach, laughing nastily. It's time, said Death, giving Mort a nudge with a sharp elbow. Follow me. Death walked toward the king, weighing his sword in his hand. Mort blinked and started to follow. The girl's eyes met his for a second and immediately looked away, and swiveled back, dragging her head around, her mouth starting to open in an oh of horror. Mort's backbone melted. He started to run towards the king. Look out, he screamed. You're in great danger. And the world turned into treacle. He began to fill up in the blue and purple shadows, like a heat stroke dream, and the sound faded away until the roar of the court became distant and scritchy, like the music in someone else's headphones. Mort saw Death standing companionably by the king, his eyes turned upwards. The minstrel gallery. Mort saw the bowman, saw the bow, saw the bolt now winging through the air at the speed of a sick snail. Slow as it was, he couldn't outrun it. It seemed like hours before he could bring his leaden legs under control. But finally he managed to get both feet to touch the floor at the same time and kicked with all the apparent acceleration of a continental drift. As he twisted slowly through the air, Death said without rancor, It won't work, you know. It's only natural that you should want to try, but it won't work. Dreamlike Mort drifted through a silent world. The bolt struck. Death brought his sword around with a double-handed swing and passed gently through the king's neck without leaving a mark. To Mort, spiraling gently through the twilight world, it looked as though a ghostly shape had dropped away. It couldn't be the king, because he was manifestly still standing there, looking directly at Death, with an expression of extreme surprise. There was a shadowy something around his feet, and a long way away, people were reacting with shouts and screams. A good, clean job, said Death. Royalty are always a problem. They tend to want to hang on. Your average peasant, now, he can't wait. Who the hell are you? Said the king. What are you doing here? Hey, guards, I didn't... This is the insistent message from his eyes finally battered through to his brain. Mort was impressed. King Oliver, or Oliver, how do you pronounce this actually? Olive. It's Olive. King Olive had held on to his throne for many years, and even when dead, knew how to behave. Oh, he said, I see. I didn't expect to see you so soon. Your Majesty, said Death, bowing. Few do. The king looked around. It was quiet and dim in the shadow world. But outside there seemed to be a lot of excitement. That's me down there, isn't it? I am afraid so, sire. Clean job. Crossbow, was it? Yes. And now, sire, if you would... Who did it? Said the king. Death hesitated. A hired assassin from Ankh-Morpork, he said. Clever. I congratulate Stohellett. Here's me filling myself with antidotes. No antidote to cold steel, eh? Eh? Indeed not, sire. The old rope ladder and the fast horse by the drawbridge trick, eh? So it would appear, sire, said Death, taking the king's shade gently by the arm. If it's any consolation, though, the horse needs to be fast, eh? Death followed his fixed grin to widen allowed his fixed grin to widen a little. I have an appointment with its rider tomorrow in Ankh, said Death. You see, he allowed the Duke to provide him with a packed lunch. The king, whose eminent suitability for his job meant that he was not automatically quick on the uptake, considered this for a moment and then gave a short laugh. He noticed more for the first time. Who's this? He said. He dead too? My apprentice, said Death, who will be getting a good talking to before he's much older, the scallywag. Mort, said Mort automatically. The sound of their talking washed around him, but he couldn't take his eyes off the scene around them. He felt real. Death looked solid. The king looked surprisingly fit and well for someone who's dead. But the rest of the world was a mass of sliding shadows. Figures were bent over the slumped body, moving through Mort as if there were no substantial, as if they were no more substantial than a mist. The girl was kneeling down, weeping. That's my daughter, said the king. I ought to feel sad. Why don't I? Emotions get left behind. It's all a matter of glands. Ah, that would be it, I suppose. She can't see us, can she? No. I suppose there's no chance that I could. None, said Death. Only she's going to be queen, and if only I could let her. Sorry. The girl looked up and through Mort. He watched the Duke walk up behind her and lay a comforting hand on her shoulder. A faint smile hovered around the man's lips. It was the shortest smile that lies on sandbanks waiting for incautious swimmers. I can't make you hear me, Mort said. Don't trust him. She peered at Mort, screwing up her eyes. He reached out, watched his hand pass straight through hers. Come along, boy. No lollygagging. Mort felt Death's hand tighten on his shoulder. They walked through the wall. He was halfway after them before he realized that walking through walls was impossible. The suicidal logic of this nearly killed him. He felt the chill of stone around his limbs before a voice in his ear said, Look at it this way. The wall can't be there. Otherwise, you wouldn't be walking through it, would you, boy? Mort, said Mort. What? My name is Mort, or Mortimer, said Mort angrily, pushing forward. The chill fell behind him. There. That wasn't so hard, was it? Mort looked up and down the length of the corridor and slapped the wall experimentally. He must have walked through it, but it felt solid enough now. Little specks of mica glittered at him. How do you do that stuff? He said. How do I do it? Is it magic? Magic is one thing it is. Magic is the one thing it isn't, boy. When you can do it by yourself, there will be nothing more that I can teach you. The king, who was considerably more diffused now, said, It's impressive, I'll grant you. By the way, I seem to be fading. It's the morphogenetic field weakening, said Death. The king's voice was no louder than a whisper. Is that what it is? It happens to everyone. Try to enjoy it. How? Now the voice was no more than the shape in the air. Just be yourself. At that moment, the king collapsed, growing smaller and smaller in the air as the field finally collapsed into a tiny, brilliant pinpoint. It happened so quickly that Mort almost missed it. From ghost to mote in half a second, with a faint sigh. Death gently clawed the glittering thing and stowed it away somewhere under his robe. What happened to him? Said Mort. Only he knows, said Death. Come. My granny says that dying is like going to sleep, Mort added, a shade hopefully. I wouldn't know. I have done neither. Mort took a last look at the corridor. The big doors had been hung back and the court was spilling out. Two older women were endeavoring to comfort the princess, but she was striding ahead of them so that they were bounced along behind her like a couple of fussy balloons. They disappeared up another corridor. Already a queen, said Death approvingly. Death-like style. They were on the roof before he spoke again. You tried to warn him, he said, removing Binky's nose bag. Yes, sir, sorry. You cannot interfere with fate. Who are you to judge who should live and who should die? Death watched Mort's expression carefully. Only the gods are allowed to do that, he added. To tinker with the fate of even one individual could destroy the whole world. Do you understand? Mort nodded miserably. Are you going to send me home? He said. Death reached down and swung him up on the saddle. Because you showed compassion? No. I might have done if he had shown pleasure. But you must learn the compassion proper to your trade. What's that? A sharp edge. Okay, Kuma. Alright, I see you. I see you, baby. Days passed, although Mort wasn't certain how many. The gloomy sun of Death's world rolled regularly across the sky. But visits to the mortal space seemed to adhere to no particular system, nor did Death visit only kings in important battles. Most of the personal visits were to quite ordinary people. Meals were served by Albert, who smiled to himself a lot, didn't say anything much. Isabel kept to her room most of the time, or rode her own pony on the black moors of the cottage. The sight of her and her hair streaming in the wind would have been more impressive if she were a better horsewoman, or if the pony had been rather larger, or if her hair was the sort that streams naturally. Some hair's got it and some hasn't. Hers hadn't. When she was out, when he wasn't out with Death, when he wasn't out on what Death referred to as the duty, Mort assisted Albert, or found jobs in the garden or stable, or browsed through Death's extensive library, reading with the speed and omnivorous common to those who discover the magic of written word for the first time. Most of the books in the library were biographies, of course. They were unusual in one respect. They were writing themselves. People who had already died obviously filled their books cover to cover, and those who hadn't been born yet had to put up with blank pages. Those in between, Mort took note, marking the place and counting the extra lines, and estimated that some books were adding paragraphs at a rate of 4 or 5 every day. He didn't recognize the handwriting. Finally, he plucked up his courage. A what? Said Death in astonishment, sitting behind his ornate desk and turning his scythe-shaped paper knife over and over in his hands. An afternoon off, repeated Mort. The room suddenly seemed oppressively big. Ouch. With himself very exposed in the middle of the carpet, about a size of a field. Oh, but why? Said Death. I can't be to attend your grand. It can't be to attend your grandmother's funeral. Grandmother's funeral. He added. I would know. I just want to, get out and meet people. Said Mort, trying to outstare in that unflinching blue gaze. But you meet people every day. Protested Death. Yes, I know. Only not for very long. Said Mort. I mean, it'd be nice to meet someone with a life expectancy more than a few minutes, sir, he added. Death drummed his fingers on the desk, making a sound not unlike mouse tap dancing, and gave Mort another few seconds to stare. He noticed that the boy seemed rather less elbows than he remembered, stood a little bit more upright, and bluntly could use a word like expectancy. It was all that library. All right, he said grudgingly, but it seems to me you have everything you need right here. The duty is not onerous, is it? No, sir. And you have a good food and warm bed and recreation and people your own age. Pardon, sir? Said Mort. My daughter, said Death. You have met her, I believe. Oh, yes. She has a very warm personality when you get to know her. I'm sure she has, sir. Nevertheless, you wish? Death launched the words in a spin of distaste. An afternoon off? Yes, sir, if you please, sir. Very well, so be it. You may have until sunset. I know this song. Isn't this fucking... There is a house in New Orleans. Isn't that song? Which I guess is appropriate for more. Death opened his great ledger, picked up a pen, and began to write. Occasionally he'd reach out and flick the beads of an abacus. After a minute, he looked up. You're still here, he said. And in your own time, too, he added sourly. Said Mort. Will people be able to see me, sir? I imagine so, I'm sure, said Death. Is there anything else I might be able to assist you with before you leave for this debauch? I imagine. I'm sure. Is there anything else I might be able to assist you with before you leave for this debauch? Well, sir, there is one thing, sir. I don't know how to get to the mortal world, sir, said Mort desperately. Death sighed loudly and pulled open a desk drawer. Just walk there. Mort nodded miserably and took the long walk to the study door, and then as he pulled it open, Death coughed. Boy, he called, and tossed something across the room. Mort caught it automatically as the door creaked open. The doorway vanished. The deep carpet underfoot became muddy cobbles, broad daylight pouring over him like quicksilver. Mort, said Mort, into the universe at large. What? The stallholder beside him. Mort stared around. He was in a crowded marketplace packed with people and animals. Every kind of thing was sold, from needles to, via a few internet profits, visions of salvation. It was impossible to hold any conversation quieter than a shout. Mort tapped the stallholder in the small of the back. Can you see me? He demanded. The stallholder squinted critically at him. I reckon so, he said. Or someone very much like you. Thank you, said Mort, immensely relieved. Don't mention it. I see lots of people every day, no charge. Want to buy some bootlaces? I don't think so, said Mort. What place is this? You don't know? A couple of people at the next stall were looking at Mort thoughtfully. His mind went into overdrive. My master travels a lot, he said truthfully. We arrived last night, and I was asleep in the car, so I've got the afternoon off. Ah! He leaned forward conspiratorially. Looking for a good time, are you? I can fix you up. I quite enjoy knowing where I am, Mort conceded. The man was taken aback. This is Ankh-Morpork, he said. Anyone ought to be able to see that and smell it, too. Mort sniffed. There was a certain something about the air in the city. He got the feeling that it was the air that had seen life. He couldn't help noting with every breath that thousands of people were very close to you, and nearly all of them had armpits. Excuse me. The stallholder regarded more critically, noting the pale face, well-cut clothes, and strange presence. A sort of coiled spring effect. Look, I'll be frank, he said. I could point you in the direction of a great brothel. I've already had lunch, said Mort vaguely, but you can tell me if we're anywhere near, I think it's called Stolat? About 20 miles hubwards. But there's nothing there for a young man of your kidney, the trader hurriedly. I know you're out by yourself and you want new experience, you want excitement, romance. Mort, meanwhile, had opened the bag death had given him. It was full of small gold coins, the size of sequins. An image formed again in his mind of the pale young face under the unfocused feelings that had haunted his mind last few days suddenly sharpened to a point. I want, he said firmly, a very fast horse. 5 minutes later, Mort was lost. This part of Ankh-Morpork was known as the Shades, an inner city area sorely in need of either governmental help or preference, a flamethrower. It couldn't be called squalid because that would be stretching the word to a breaking point. It was beyond squalor, and out the other side, where by some sort of Einsteinian reversal, it achieved a magnificent horribleness that it wore like an architectural award. It was noisy and sultry and smelled like a cow shed floor. It didn't so much as have a neighborhood as an ecology, like a great land-based coral reef. There were humans, all right, humanoid equivalents of lobsters, squids, shrimps, and so on, and sharks. Mort wandered hopelessly along the wandering streets. Anyone hovering at rooftop height would have noticed a certain pattern in the crowds behind him, suggesting a number of men converging nonchalantly on a target, and would rightly have concluded that Mort and his gold had about the same life expectancy as a three-legged hedgehog on a six-lane motorway. It is probably already apparent that the Shades was not the sort of place to have inhabitants. It had denizens. Periodically, Mort would try to engage in conversation to find the way to a good horse dealer. The denizens would usually mutter something and hurry away, since anyone wishing to live in the Shades for longer than maybe 3 hours developed very specialized senses indeed, and would no more hang around near Mort than a peasant would stand near a tall tree in thundery weather. Mort, and so Mort came to the last river, Alp, uh, the greatest of rivers. Even before it entered the city, it was slow and heavy with the silt of the plains. By the time he got to the Shades, even an agnostic could have walked across it. It was hard to drown in the Ankh, but easy to suffocate. Mort looked at the surface doubtfully. It seemed to be moving. There were bubbles in it. It had to be water. He sighed and turned away. Three men appeared behind him, as though extruded from the stonework. They had the heavy, stolid look of those thugs whose appearance in any narrative means that it's time for the hero to be menaced a bit. Although not too much, because it's obvious that they're going to be horribly surprised. They were leering, they were good at it. One of them had drawn a knife, which he waved in little circles in the air. He advanced slowly towards Mort, while the other two hung back to provide immoral support. Give us the money, he rasped. Mort's hand went to the bag on his belt. Hang on a minute, he said. What happens then? What? I mean, is my money or my life, said Mort. That's the sort of thing robbers are supposed to demand. Your money or your life. I read that in a book once, he added. Possibly, conceded the robber. He he felt he was losing the initiative, but rallied magnificently. On the other hand, he could for money and your life. Pulling off the double, you might say. The man looked sideways at his colleagues who snickered on cue. In that case, Mort hefted the bag in one hand, preparatory to chucking it as far into the ankh as he could, even though there was a reasonable chance it would bounce. Hey, what are you doing? Said the robber. He started to run forward, but halted when Mort gave the bag a threatening jerk. Well, said Mort, I look at it like this. If you're going to kill me anyways, I might as well get rid of the money. It's entirely up to you. To illustrate the point, he took one gold coin and flicked it out across the river, which accepted it with an unfortunate sucking noise. The thieves shuddered. The leading thief looked at the bag, looked at his knife, looked at Mort's face. He looked at his colleagues. Excuse me, he said, and then they went into a huddle. Mort measured the distance to the end of the alley. He wouldn't make it. Anyways, these three looked as though chasing people was another thing they were good at. It was only logic that left them feeling a little stretched. Their leader turned back to Mort. He gave a final glance at the other two. I think we kill you and take a chance on the money, he said. We don't want this sort of thing to spread. The other two drew their knives. Mort swallowed. This would be unwise, he said. Why? Well, I won't like it for one. You're not supposed to like it. You're supposed to die, said the thief, advancing. I don't think I'm due to die, said Mort, backing away. I'm sure I would have been told. Yeah, said the thief, who had been getting fed up with this. Yeah, well, you have been, haven't you? Great steaming elephant turds. Mort had just stepped backwards again, through a wall. The leading thief glared at the solid stone that had swallowed Mort, and then threw down his knife. Well, blank me, he said. A blanking wizard. I hate blanking wizards. You shouldn't blank them, then, muttered one of his henchmen, effortlessly pronouncing a row of dashes. I guess, well, dash, 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 dash me, he said, a dash, 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 dash-ing wizard. I hate dash, 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 dash-ing wizards. You shouldn't dash, dash, dash them then, muttered one of his henchmen, effortlessly pronouncing a row of dashes. The third member of the trio, who was a little slow of thinking, said, Here, he walked through the wall. And we've been following him for ages too, muttered the second one. Fine when you are, Pill Garlic. I said I thought he was a wizard. Only wizards did folk walk around here by themselves. Didn't I say he looked like a wizard? I said, you're saying a good deal too much, growled the leader. I saw him. He walked right through the wall there. Oh, yeah? Yeah, right through it. Didn't you see? Think you're sharp, do you? Sharp enough. Come to that, the leader scooped his knife out of the dirt in one snarky movement. Sharp as this, the third thief lurched over to the wall and kicked it hard a few times, while behind him there were sounds of scuffle and a damp bubbling noises. Yep, it's a wall, okay, he said. That's a wall if I ever saw one. How do you think they do it, lads? Lads? He tripped over the prone bodies. Oh, he said, slow as his mind was. He was quick enough to realize that something very important. He was in a back alley in the shades, and he was alone. He ran for it and got quite a long way. Death walks slowly across the tiles in the lifetime maroon, inspecting a serried rows of busy hourglasses. Albert followed dutifully behind with great ledger in his arms. The sound roared behind them, a vast great waterfall of noise. It came from the shelves where, stretching away into the infinite distance, row upon row of hourglasses poured away, and the sands of mortal time. It was a very heavy sound. It was a heavy sound, a dull sound, a sound that poured like solid custard over the bright roly-poly padding of the soul. Very well, said Death at last. I make it 3. A quiet night. That be Goody Hamstring, the abbot Blob sang again, and his princess Kelly, said Albert. Death looked at the 3 hourglasses in his hand. I was thinking of sending the lad out, he said. Albert consulted his ledger. Oh, I need some water. I need some freaking water, dude. I did not. I'm so sorry, baby. I did not do the chicken. Mm. Mm. Okay. Albert consulted his ledger. Well, Goody wouldn't be any trouble, and the abbot is what you might call experienced, he said. Shame about the princess, only 15, could be tricky. Yes, it is a pity. Master Death stood with a third glass in his hand, staring thoughtfully at the play of light across its surface. He sighed. One so young. Are you feeling all right, Master? Said Albert, his voice fully concerned. Time, like an ever-rolling stream, bears all its master. What? Death snapping out of it. You've been overdoing it, Master. That's what it is. What are you blathering about, man? You had a bit of a funny turn there, Master. Nonsense. I have never felt better. Now, what we were talking about? Albert shrugged and peered down at the entries of the book. Goody's a witch. He said she might get a bit annoyed if you send more. All practitioners of magic earn the right, once their own personal sands had run out, to be claimed by Death himself rather than his minor functionaries. Death didn't appear to hear Albert. He was staring at Princess Kelly's hourglass again. What is that sense inside your head of wistful regret that things are the way they apparently are? Sadness, Master, I think. Now, I am sadness. Albert stood with his mouth open. Finally, he got a grip of himself, long enough to blurt out, Master, we were talking about Mort. Mort too, your apprentice, Master, said Albert patiently. Tall young lad, of course. Well, we'll send him. Is he ready to go solo, Master? Said Albert doubtfully. Death thought about it. He can do it, he said at last. He's keen, he's quick to learn and read. And really, he added, people can't expect to have me running around after them all the time. Mort stared blankly at the valet wall hangings a few inches from his eyes. I've walked through a wall, he thought. That's impossible. He gingerly moved the hangings aside to see if a door was lurking somewhere. There was nothing but crumbling plaster, which had cracked away in places to reveal some dampish but emphatically solid brickwork. He prodded it experimentally. It was quite clear that he wasn't going back out of the way. Well, what now? A voice behind him said, um, excuse, excuse me, please. He turned around slowly. Grouped around a table in the middle of the room was a Clatchian family of father, mother, half dozen children of dwindling size. 8 pairs of eyes were fixed on Mort. A ninth pair belonged to an aged grandparent of indeterminate sex. Mort, because of their owner, had taken advantage of the interruption to get some elbow room at the communal rice bowl, taking the view that a boiled fish in the hand was worth any amount of unexplained manifestations. And the silence was punctured by the sound of a determined mastication. In one corner of the crowded room was a little shrine to Offler, the six-armed crocodile god of Klotch. It, it was grinning just like death, except, of course, death didn't have a flock of holy birds that brought him news of his worshippers and also kept his teeth clean. Flatchians prize hospitality above all other virtues. As Mort stared, the woman took another plate off the shelf behind her and silently began to fill it with the big bowl, snatching a choice cut of catfish from the ancient's hands after a brief struggle. Her kohl-rimmed eyes remained steadily on Mort, however. It was the father who had spoken. Mort bowed nervously. Sorry, he said, I seem to walk through this wall. It was rather lame, he had to admit. Please? Said the man. The woman, her bangles jangling, carefully arranged a few slices of pepper across the plate and sprinkled it with a dark green sauce that Mort was afraid he recognized. He tried it a few weeks before, and although it was a complicated recipe, one taste had been enough to know that it was made out of fish entrails marinated for several years in a vat of shark bile. Death had said it was an acquired taste. Mort had decided not to make the effort. He tried to sidle around the edge of the room towards the bead-hung doorway. All the heads turning to watch me, tried to grin. The woman said, "Why does the demon show his teeth, husband of my life?" The man said, "It could be hunger, moon of my desire. Pile on more fish." The ancestor grumbled, "I was eating that wretched child. Woe unto the world when there is no respect for age." And now the fact that while the words entered Mort's ear in their spoken Clatchian, with all the curlicues and subtle diphthongs of a language so ancient and sophisticated that it had 15 words meaning assassination, before the rest of the world had caught on to the idea of bashing one another over the head with rocks, they arrived in his brain as clear and understandable as his mother tongue. "I'm no demon, I'm human," he said. He stopped in his shock as the words emerged in perfect clutch. "You're a thief," said the father. "A murderer to creep in thus? Are you a tax gatherer?" Hmm. His hands slipped under the table, came up holding a meat cleaver honed to paper thinness. His wife screamed and dropped the plate and clutched the youngest children to her. Mort watched the blade weave through the air and gave in. "I bring you greetings from the uttermost circles of hell," he hazarded. This change was remarkable. The cleaver was lowered and the family broke into broad smiles. That's funny. "There is much luck to us if a demon visits," beamed the father. "What is your wish, O foul spawn of Offler's loins?" "Sorry," said Mort. "A demon brings blessings and good fortune on the man that helps it." To the man, "How may we be of assistance, O devil dog's breath of the nether pit?" "Well, I'm not very hungry." said Mort. But if you know where I can get a fast horse, I could be in Stowe before sunset. The man beamed and bowed. I know of the very place, noxious extrusion of the bowels. If you would be so good as to follow me. Mort hurried out after him. The ancient ancestor watched them go with critical expression, his jowls rhythmically chewing. That was what they call a demon around here, it said. Offler wrought this country of dampness. Even their demons are third rate. Not a patch on the demon we had in the old country. The demon placed a small bowl of rice in the fondled middle pair of hands of the Offler statue. It would be gone in the morning, and stood back. Husband did say that last month at the Curry Gardens he served a creature who was not there, she said. He was impressed. 10 minutes later, the man returned and, in solemn silence, placed a small heap of gold coins on the table. They presented enough wealth to purchase quite a large part of the city. He had a bag of them, he said. The family stared at the money for some time. The wife sighed. Riches bring many problems, she said. What are we to do? We return to Klotch, said the husband firmly, where our children could grow up in a proper country, true to the glorious traditions of our ancient race, and men do not need to work as waiters for wicked masters, but can stand tall and proud. And we must leave right now, fragrant blossom of the date palm. Why so soon, O hard-working son of the desert? Because, said the man, I have just sold the Patrician's champion racehorse. Yay! And we are hmm. and we are caught up. Huzzah! No, shut the fuck up.
Yes, Poppy is by far the number 1 top laner dispatch. Take a look at this. Very broken champion. Top lane, challenger.
Hello guys, I'm
What? You know why Poppy is so strong right now, guys? Look at jungle meta, Rengar Kha'Zix. Look at top lane meta, it's like tanks and melee bruisers. Poppy counters pretty much every meta top lane champion in the game right now.
Yeah, hell yeah. I should just play Poppy. Okay. based. Is this fucking real?
So right now, I don't want to rush it because you guys are, trying to make us look as bad as possible. I don't want to rush it. I want to take my time. We have plenty of time.
Okay.
And
You
I
know
wanna
what?
get a
I'm
good-
just gonna
I wanna get a
assume
deal where our
that
nation
that
and
he
the
did not
world
say
is
that
safe
because it
from
makes me feel
lunatics
sane.
with nuclear weapons. Yes.
If it does go to 200, are you okay with that, sir? If oil goes to
I don't care.
think
I
that
don't
there's
care how
nothing
it makes
worse
him
than a
look.
nuclear
I'm just gonna
weapon that
assume
does
that he
work.
did not suggest that because it is terrifying to think the opposite. It is absolutely fucking frightening. Hmm.
Final question.
Final question. All right, all right.
Raspberry asks, penis?
Balls, even. Cock, if you would be so inclined.
Need I say more?
Need I say anything?
Mm-hmm. Was that really the final question?
Penis.
Is that really how
Balls.
we're going out? We're just going out on...
Fart, poop, poop.
We're just going out on penis?
Yep.
All right.
This
Cut
is
it. No,
this
cut it
is
right
the
there.
fan base we've cultivated.
I was gonna just cut it. Just cut that right there. Just cut it right there.
I
Yeah.
have done as I've needed to. Thank you very much. Penis cut. Penis, balls, poo poo, fart, boot, bup.
And who did you vote for?
The $1,000,000 question. Trump.
Trump. Donald Trump.
The swing is because people want lower prices. They probably believe that Trump will give them that.
Rent is expensive. Foods are going up. Utility bills are up.
And that's your hope, to see a little bit more of an affordable life?
Absolutely.
My name is Zoran Mamdani. I'm going to be running for mayor next year. Wow. Yes, sir.
The dawn of Mayor Mamdani's campaign was going out to Fordham Road here in the Bronx and Hillside Avenue in Queens right after Trump.
I don't know. I'm just kind of sitting here quietly. I'm caught up. I'm done reading for today. So yeah, poggers.